All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going to try and do the impossible, a complete speed run of Western philosophy. So buckle up because we are about to move very, very fast.
So let's just jump right in at the very beginning with, a huge fundamental question. In the beginning, there was, well, what was there exactly?
Right. Was it a bird? An omelet? Who knows? But look, the point is, there was stuff. And a bunch of really curious guys back in ancient Greece wanted to figure out why there was stuff and what all that stuff actually was.
And that's pretty much how they invented philosophy. Now, it literally translates to love of wisdom, though as you can see here, there's a more modern interpretation that I think we can all agree is pretty relatable for anyone who's had to pick a college major.
Okay, so let's get into how this whole thing kicked off. Our story starts where, let's be honest, a lot of stories start, with the ancient Greeks. Things really got moving when this fella showed up. You've probably heard of him, Socrates. His whole thing was just wandering around Athens asking people incredibly annoying questions until, well, they eventually got so fed up they sentenced him to death for it. But for our purposes today, we're just going to use his other, slightly more memorable name. It's also worth knowing he never actually wrote anything down himself, which is where his student comes into the picture. That student was Plato, and he wrote everything down, including this kind of brilliantly simple way to think about his theory of forms. The basic idea is that for every single thing we see in our world, like a cat, there's a perfect, ideal version of it, a perfect cat, existing in some higher, perfect place.
And then you've got Plato's student Aristotle, who followed up with a few minor contributions of his own. Small stuff like inventing the entire foundation for modern logic. No big deal, right?
So this slide right here maps out the absolutely wild ride we're about to take. We've just covered the Greeks, but things are going to get a little dark for a while, then really bright, then super enlightened, and then it all just gets kind of messy. Okay, so after the Roman Empire collapsed, Europe stumbled into what we call the Dark Ages, which lasted for about 1,000 years. For a long time, philosophy was mostly just about trying to make all that old Greek thinking fit in with Christian ideas, but eventually things did start to pick back up. And out of this period, we got one of the most useful thinking tools ever, Occam's razor. It's such a simple idea. If you have a bunch of competing explanations for something, the one that makes the fewest assumptions is probably the right one. Basically, don't overcomplicate it. Then the Black Death happened and wiped out like 40% of Europe. Yikes. But in its wake, we got the Renaissance, which literally means rebirth. There's this fun theory that a big reason for this new era of clarity was a collective switch from drinking beer all day to drinking coffee. Can't prove it, but it makes you think. Next up, we have the Enlightenment. This is the period that really changed everything. And yeah, if you've got that one friend who always makes the annoying Starbucks joke, you can thank a certain Frenchman for that. That Frenchman was René Descartes, and he decided he was going to find absolute truth by doubting every single thing he possibly could. I mean, everything. Does the world exist? Maybe not. Do I exist? Not sure. He kept going until he found just one thing he absolutely could not doubt. And here it is, his big conclusion. He realized he couldn't doubt the fact that he was doubting. And since doubting is a type of thinking, he had to exist at the very least as a thinking thing. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Bam! So this one idea kicked off this massive philosophical smackdown. On one side, you had the continental rationalists, like Descartes, saying all true knowledge comes from pure reason. And on the other side, you had the British empiricists, guys like John Locke and David Hume, who are like, no, you idiots, all knowledge comes from what we see and touch in the outside world. So this big debate raged on and on, until this German philosopher finally showed up to settle things. Immanuel Kant, or as we'll call him, Walter Big Wang, basically told everyone to just calm down. He argued they were both kind of right. He created this brilliant synthesis, saying, yeah, knowledge starts with our senses, but our minds actively shape and structure that information. Okay, from Kant onwards, I'm not gonna lie, things get a lot more complicated. Philosophy starts to splinter off into all these super specialized fields, each one tackling more and more complex questions.
By the time we hit the 20th century, the whole field had pretty much been divided into these official categories. You've got epistemology, which asks, can we know stuff? Metaphysics, how does reality work? Ethics, how do we know what's right and wrong? Logic, how do we think straight? And aesthetics, why do we think some things are beautiful?
And then this guy, Friedrich Nietzsche, basically kicks down the door with a philosophical hand grenade. He famously declares that God is dead and argues that the universe has absolutely no built-in meaning or structure. The only meaning there is the meaning we invent for ourselves. Pretty cheerful stuff, right?
So this all leads us to a really modern, really important question. In an age of science, when we have tools to answer so many big questions, what's philosophy even for anymore? You know, especially when you have to explain your degree choice to your dad.
Well, let's just imagine a scenario here, a passionate defense. You might not know how the stock market works. Maybe you don't even know how to shave properly. But what if, just what if, you found yourself in this very specific, very high-stakes situation?
I mean, in that one incredibly unlikely moment, all those years of reading dusty old books would finally pay off. You'd walk away a hero. And that's the point, isn't it? Philosophy trains your mind to think through complex problems, even really weird ones.
So what's the real takeaway here? Look, philosophy might not always help you pay the rent, but it's still the field that asks the biggest questions we have about consciousness, about existence, about meaning. It's the foundation for everything else. And on that note, who's laughing now, Dad?